to tribes.
Move this down a little bit. I'm so short. Jala, Dr. Samantha Chisholm Hatfield, wa amnushi, shi salagi, I tetudene. Hello, my name is Samantha Chisholm Hatfield. I am enrolled with Siletz, and I'm also Cherokee. So, what we did for this study was a semi-structured interview with elders and what we deemed as cultural specialists. And that entailed anyone who was older than 35 or 40. And those people knew, they either watched, they either heard, they either participated in, they accompanied people who regularly engaged in cultural traditional behaviors. So those people saw it. They might not be able to do it, but they could recount it. They were the storytellers. They were the academics, per se. So we watched for those people as well, and we interviewed those. And primarily, before I hit the next slide, we used traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, because TEK is very important to tribes, and that is a system of information that a lot of the tribes are basing their information on. You can use Western science all you want, but TEK is the kernel, that's the base, that's the nugget that everything comes down to. That's what's relevant to tribes. So it's really important when you work with tribes or intertribally how information is gathered. And you need to know who's giving you that information. So the 5 tribes we worked with were Quinault, the Salish Kootenai tribes, the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribes of western Montana, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz of Oregon, which is a coastal tribe right on the middle of the coastline in Oregon, the Duckwater Shoshone, and the Shivwits Band of the Paiute. So we had a whole range of tribes, not just coastal, not just inland. We had a good variety. So one of the findings is native culture is rooted in the land. And that's pretty basic. Most people are like, well, duh. But to Western science, that isn't a natural concept. That isn't something that comes organically as a response from a study. This is one of the traditional canoes up in Tahola. It's in the administrative building. I need to acknowledge that none of the information I give is sacred. All the sacred information has been only given back to the tribes. And so none of my information is considered sensitive or culturally specific for a tribe that would be a sensitive area. So I need to acknowledge that. This is a canoe landing site, also in Tahola. One of the managers that I interviewed said, oh, we have to go out here, we have to go out here. So when climate change comes in, it's going to affect the site drastically. This site is really special because this is where the canoes land. This is a canoe journey that goes up the ocean, and all the people come out here. And he was telling me that they take a totem pole, and just beyond that tree that sticks up, it's embedded into the ground. And so this is almost like a church in essence when this canoe journey happens, and songs are sung and it's a happy time. But this is a really special place. It's not like a sacred place as a ceremony would happen, but this is special. So if there's erosion that's happening, or if the sea changes the area, it's going to be really detrimental. Likewise, this is the Salish Kootenai area. This is a veterans memorial, but you can see how special the land is and what natural resources are valued. You can see the eagle in the middle, and then on either side of the eagle are riders on horses, and horses are very important to the Salish Kootenai. And then on either side on the ends are bison, and they have a very special program that has introduced the bison, and they have this whole bison area out there in Montana. So the poles for the teepee are also very special. And those come from the land. Everything comes from the land. And so that respect, that reciprocity of keeping that maintenance of all of those cycles going is very vital. One of our other findings was that cultural markers are heavily relied upon. And some of those are landscapes. When I called to make appointments for oral interviews to go out to Montana, the Cultural Resources Department said, well, we haven't had any snow. And I knew immediately, but the people that I talked with said, why is snow important? It shouldn't matter. You can still fly in snow. There's a certain period when what happens is called talk story time. And in the Northwest, you can only tell certain information during that time. For the Salish Kootenai, these hilltops should have been about half white with snow for their talk story time to be initiated. And you can see, and I got there later, so it had snowed, but you can see that just the tops of them are white. Likewise for the Shivwits and the Paiute, or the Shoshone, rabbits, they had 3 sizes of rabbits that are very important. And they're talking about the changes that happen to those rabbits, not only the behaviors of where they go and their patterns of reproduction, but they also noted that there are worms, what they called worms. So they're having parasites, so they can no longer eat those rabbits. And then the antelope, which is a traditional food source for them, they were noting that the antelope patterns have shifted down. The mountains and the streams and the little puddles that happen, they called puddles, up in the mountains were coming down and they were evaporating. And so these animals are moving downward to find water and to find other areas. And this was abnormal for them. This is really a distress. And then likewise for the Siletz, the eels. The eels have always inhabited the Siletz River, and they are no longer there. But that pattern of the eels showing up was reliant on the eel ants every year. In May, which are carpenter ants, by the way. I didn't learn that they were actually carpenter ants until I think I was 23. We always heard the eel ants, and we still hear that. Oh, the eel ants are out. It's time to go eeling, even though we can't eel anymore. There are no eels in the river. But in May, the first hot weather signifies the eel ants coming out, and that signifies the time to go eeling. So everybody watches for the eel ants, and then they tell. The first person that sees it or the second person that sees it then tells, and it's like a system of notification. So the most profound thing we found was that time is cultural. It's an actual cultural entity, almost. Not only is it by season, but there are calendar reliances as well. And then it's like a stopwatch. We can tell when things bloom, when things bud, when things die off, when patterns change, when hair falls off, when hair comes out on animals. You know what time it is. And so that system of time is very holistic and very 3D. So Indian time, which is a joke in many circles in Indian country, is actually real. It follows the environmental patterns that occur. It's holistic, it's based in natural resources and events, and it's 3D rather than the linear time that we base our Western systems on. And then it's evolved and complicated. It's based on our natural laws. So not only are there changes in seasonality that disturb that, but the sense of wisdom that has been based in TEK for generations. My grandfather said, well, great-grandpa did. Well, my grandma always went. Well, great-grandma always got here, is completely shifting. And because of that, those senses of identities are being impacted very dramatically within not only families, not only within individuals, but within the entire community and tribes, because their reliance on their system, their ecosystem, is being completely shifted. It's either not there or it's being altered. So the most significant aspect is how time is being impacted, that whole system of time. One of the things when I went to Montana was every single person told me about this lake. This is Flathead Lake in Polson, Montana, and usually this entire lake is frozen over. But the people that I met in the grocery store, the people that I got gas from, the people in the hotel, every single one of them told me there's a space out in the middle that's a little bit darker, and it wasn't frozen over. And they said, this is the first year that we haven't had this lake frozen over. This should be frozen over. It was a really urgent thing that they were so concerned about. They didn't know what to do with it. They felt really helpless. They felt like, oh my gosh, this has always happened. Why isn't this happening? And so some things are being adapted, and some things are being maintained. Talking story time is being adjusted. Natural resources are often a source of oral history. They're being kept alive, but it's not accompanying a behavior. That traditional pattern of we go do this is more of, let me tell you about when we, and that is being kept alive. There's a sense of we will do it again, but they don't know when. So for the Siletz tribe, one of these things are the acorns and acorn soup. And when a woman gets married, she makes acorn soup in her new home. And that's the culmination of the marriage. That's the ring on the finger, in essence. And they're made in traditional baskets. So when her new husband eats the acorn soup, they're married. Ta-da! Right? But acorns are shifting in abundance and in place so that we don't collect acorns anymore. And this is a practice that is no longer done. So when somebody says, I'm running on Indian time, you can say, I gotcha, I know what you're talking about. And this is my clock, by the way. So I want to thank the Northwest CSC. They initially funded the initial program, and the Great Basin LCC funded the second. And I'm really appreciative for those of you whose lands are indigenous here. I'm very pleased to be invited and to be coming to your land. Shua Shinula. I usually go over. Yes.
Yeah, so the question is, climate change was shifting events. This notion of that the reference is changing and the context is changing versus this is the time when the time we do this. Mm-hmm. So my question is that the oral history of people being able to act and interact with their environment in order to sustain themselves over this year horizon. So the we do, changes. Does that change, the oral history record? In other words, that there's an evolving story.
Mm-hmm. What I have seen is that it's in a shift, it's in a transition, that people are hanging on to that old tradition, all that old knowledge, that knowledge base that's there, but they're acknowledging now we can't do that. There's almost a, but clause, but now, this is what we do. Last year was the first year I heard one of our cultural resources people say everything for basketry was a month early. And so we used to, and he went into all of that. I know that I've heard it incidentally, not very direct, but that, that oral tradition that comes down through those indirect methods is taking place. And it seems to be pretty consistent through all the tribes. That's a pretty common thing. Well, we used to, but now that phrase can be applied to any of them, I heard it in every single one. Rock, paper, scissors.
Real quick, just is the same thing you were just saying, like these indicators
Mhm.
that we know for each culture, like our planners or people planners and the cultural resources people working together to kind of track those data so that we have some timeline to be able to chart out like early, late emergence of any of our different signs for when things are coming available because of the importance to the subsistence economy and tradition.
I don't know if anyone is formally tracking it. That wasn't part of my scope. I kind of turned them loose, on semi-structured interviews and just said, well, tell me about, and whatever they came out, there were clear patterns of, this happened, but it's not happening now, or, this is early, or these birds left 3 weeks early, and they're usually here until mid-June, and they left, in May, that sort of thing. I don't know of anybody that's tracking it, but I'm sure they probably are. I don't know.
This gentleman, thank you for your talk. In your methodology, was there an attempt to compare any earlier ethnographic data on oral history informant data and compare that with today's or modern storytelling, which talks about what it was with the it is?
What I did a lit review, but I wanted to make sure that we wanted to look at really just climate change and what's happening here, rather than, well, this was the flood of, 67 or whatever it was, or, we wanted to have it be a real distinct, unique, this time in this period, and have it go back to elders that were 70-ish, 80-ish, and really distinct timelines.
Another question.
Yeah, this is along a similar vein, but if you come across encounters in oral histories, references to past climate change or instability.
A little bit. And we talked about, kind of in the same vein, when I did my dissertation, I came across that, and things like, the Siletz River froze, the blips that would be weather rather than climate, and those seem to be, we addressed that, but it didn't seem to be significant enough to add it into this, because the climate is changing so drastically so fast that within a couple of generations they've seen some pretty dramatic spikes and changes, whereas with my oral history, with my dissertation oral history, I went back to the 60s and did it through, and there were little blips compared to this, 2-generation, 20-year-ish, or 80-year-ish period of time, 2 generational time frames. So it didn't seem as significant. But we did kind of look at that.
Anybody else? Thank you so much.
He's going back there.
Sorry. There was one more. Go ahead. We have time. So.
It's more of a broader question, so bear with me as a non-native. But do you have any suggestions on us who, want to work with tribal stakeholders on how to best share information and knowledge while respecting culture? It's something I'm trying to be more and more aware of, that there's certain situations where information maybe should not be shared. There might be some context I'm not aware of, or this is a very weird philosophical question, but it's kind of
The best bet would be to go through each tribe and then go through whoever their cultural resources department manager would be, and say, I really want to do this, and I'm looking to be sensitive to your information, and I don't want to step on any toes. Can you, can we facilitate a meeting, or can we, work together on this project? And they will guide you. Tribes are really adept at working with non-natives, and agency, state, city, all of that. We've been doing it for a long time. So Every tribe has developed their, their policies and then, the protocol, and they know that they have to guide whoever's asking. So it's tribe by tribe. There isn't just one flat, whatever.
Thank you.